thought for 1 second. Tonight, we begin with a development that Pentagon officials had feared, NATO analysts had anticipated, and White House advisors had quietly prepared for. A nuclear warning that unfolded not over weeks, but in hours. Hours that changed the temperature of this conflict. Hours that forced emergency meetings across 3 continents. Hours that brought the word nuclear back into daily headlines. What Russia did today crossed a line that Washington had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, Ukraine did not hesitate. They responded with precision, with force, and with unmistakable determination. This is what happened and why it matters more than anything we've reported in months. For weeks now, there had been signals, not official statements, not formal diplomatic cables, just signals that Russia was preparing something unprecedented. Russia has been aggressive, yes, but they have been calculated in their aggression. Their moves have followed a certain rhythm, a predictability, almost a pattern. But what set off alarm bells in Washington this week was that the pattern went silent. Intelligence analysts who monitor Russian military activity know the indicators. The movement of mobile nuclear launchers, the repositioning of strategic bomber squadrons, the sudden increase in encrypted communications between Moscow and military commanders, the unexpected silence from state media, all of that went quiet. Official after Security Council meeting described Russia's statement as direct, threatening, and perhaps most importantly, tied specifically to the ATACMS strikes that Ukraine launched with American-supplied missiles. Russia's foreign ministry declared that the use of American long-range weapons against Russian territory constituted a direct act of aggression by the United States. They warned of severe consequences and stated that Russia reserved the right to respond with all means necessary. But nuclear threats only work if the target hesitates. Ukraine did not. In fact, their response today was among the most aggressive we've seen in this entire conflict. Here's what we know. Within 6 hours of Russia's warning, Ukraine launched a coordinated strike operation. These weren't the limited drone attacks we've seen before. These were precision strikes using advanced Western weapons systems that Ukraine only deploys when they are preparing to inflict maximum strategic damage. Tonight, Ukrainian military command confirmed that they launched precision strikes on multiple Russian military targets, including a major logistics hub in occupied territory that had recently been reinforced for what analysts believe was a planned winter offensive. Ukraine struck before Russia could consolidate. They hit fuel depots. They hit ammunition storage facilities. They hit command and control centers that were likely coordinating the very operations Russia had been planning. In other words, Ukraine targeted the nervous system of Russia's military infrastructure in the region. The logistics backbone that would have made Russia's next move operational, this is what made Washington's private warnings so urgent. Russia's nuclear rhetoric wasn't just symbolic, it was designed to freeze Ukraine's operations. It represented the kind of intimidation that could paralyze decision-making if left unchallenged. And Ukraine, understanding that fully, responded with force. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically, they are anticipating them. As reports continued coming in throughout the evening, we learned more about the scale of Ukraine's response. Ukrainian ground forces carried out coordinated operations along the Eastern Front, forcing Russian units to divert resources from offensive positions. Ukrainian special operations units targeted communication infrastructure that had been upgraded in the last month. For every advance they have made, Ukraine has countered with something that complicates their supply lines, disrupts their command structure, or destroys their equipment. Remember, Russia thought Ukraine would fall in 3 days. They thought Kyiv would surrender without a fight. They thought the West would lose interest and move on. They thought nuclear threats would paralyze decision-making. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. Ukraine is stronger militarily than at any point in this conflict. Western support has not wavered, it has intensified. And Russia's nuclear rhetoric is being met with defiance, not submission. What makes this moment so dangerous and so revealing is that Russia's latest warning happened at a time when Vladimir Putin is under immense internal pressure. Military hardliners want total escalation. Economic advisors want negotiation before sanctions cause further damage. Regional governors want resources redirected to domestic needs. Oligarchs want stability to protect their remaining assets. Putin is balancing these demands while managing a war that has cost far more than he ever anticipated. And when leaders in that position make sudden moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. Tonight's nuclear warning should be seen in that context not as a sign of Russian power, but as a sign of Russian desperation. Washington's statement, now distributed to allies and media outlets, was designed to signal that the United States is not willing to allow nuclear intimidation to dictate the course of this conflict. Officials said plainly that Russia's warning was inconsistent with responsible nuclear state behavior. That is diplomatic language for, we see what you're doing, and it won't work. You don't usually hear that tone from the State Department unless something serious is at stake. Secretary of Defense officials reinforced that American support for Ukraine remains ironclad, and that the provision of ATACMS and other advanced weapons will continue as needed. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Zelensky addressed his nation in a calm, resolute speech tonight. He said, "We will not be intimidated by threats. We have heard them before." He said, "Every missile they threaten, we answer with precision. Every warning they issue, we answer with action." And he said, "Ukraine does not seek escalation, but Ukraine will not accept subjugation." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a nation that understands just how high the stakes have become. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Russia's nuclear warning wasn't isolated. Along with the official Kremlin statement, Belarus also announced joint military exercises near the Polish border. Russian state media increased coverage of nuclear preparedness drills. Russian cyber units increased attacks targeting Ukrainian infrastructure. All of this happened within the same 48-hour period. When Russia moves multiple pieces at once, it means something larger is underway. It means this is coordinated. It means this was planned. And it means we should expect more in the coming days. Intelligence analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Russia is preparing a major winter offensive and using nuclear rhetoric as cover. Another is that Russia is attempting to fracture Western unity by raising the specter of nuclear conflict. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that Russia is attempting to establish a new normal where nuclear threats become routine tools of coercion. But today, Ukraine took that card off the table. They didn't pause operations. They didn't seek emergency negotiations. They didn't show fear. They struck back with devastating effectiveness. What we're watching now is a test of resolve. Russia wants to see if nuclear threats can change Western behavior. Ukraine wants to show that intimidation will not work. NATO wants to prevent escalation while maintaining support. And the United States wants to prevent a precedent where nuclear blackmail becomes acceptable. The outcome of this test will shape international security for decades. Tonight, we've heard from defense officials who are now monitoring Russian nuclear forces around the clock. They say there is no indication of imminent nuclear use. They say Russia's movements appear designed for signaling, not action. And they say Russia's decision to issue this warning is likely part of a broader information warfare strategy intended to weaken Western resolve. But Ukraine is not backing down. In fact, Ukraine is pressing forward. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, Russia learned something they have learned many times before. Ukraine will not surrender. The West will not abandon its allies. And nuclear threats will not go unanswered. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. Russia's gamble did not pay off. Ukraine's response was exactly what it needed to be. And the world is watching to see what comes next. And we will be here watching every detail as the next phase unfolds.